Hello, welcome to the Wealth Wisdom Financial Channel, and please join me in welcoming our guest, Kendra James Anderson, to the show today. Really excited for y'all to meet her. Be sure you hit that like button, comment, let her know that you're loving the gems I know she's going to drop into the conversation today. Kendra, we've got your full bio below, as well as links to your website and podcast and such. But give us a little bit of a sneak peek behind the scenes of who you are, where you're coming from today.
Yeah, well, first, Amanda, thanks for having me on. Very excited to be here and to chat with you. Kendra James Anderson. I'm the owner of the Finance Femme, so I own a virtual CFO and accounting firm. We exclusively support women-owned businesses all over the U.S. Full service end-to-end accounting and finance solution. I've always been like the business finance nerdy kind of person that loves to see the inside of what's going on in business. And that's why I started the firm. And I'll let you tell me how far back you want to go and that why we started it. But yeah, that's
Yeah, great. And thank you so much for being here. I'm like secretly, I would love to watch over your shoulder, and see what it's like to be a CFO. So maybe one day I can job shadow you or something.
absolutely.
Do bring a friend to work day kind of thing.
Yeah.
But take us back to Kendra as a kid. What are some of your earliest memories about money and kind of what it was like as a kid learning how money works and what it's for and all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my dad is an engineer. Excuse me, getting over a cold. My dad is an engineer and my mom is an accountant. And so they're growing up, everything's always been very analytical and well thought through. So there was never just like, oh, we're gonna go and buy X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, we're gonna buy X, Y, and Z because it needs to provide this for us or this type of return. Like it's always those kinds of conversations. And so I have a feeling that has something to do with why I'm so into finance. Even like my big sister, she's in engineering. So it's kind of just all within all of us. And so when I went off to school, I went to Clemson University. And so when I went off to school, I knew I wanted to have some kind of a business degree. I did not like accounting. I could tell from conversations with my mom that accounting wasn't my jam. So I started in business finance and went and graduated with that degree, and it was like perfect. And so I always knew, I always had this interest in business finance. I've always had this interest in money, but also in like the actual business side of it, like what make businesses work, economics, like what's happening overseas. How does that impact businesses here? Like that's always been very interesting. And so when I graduated from Clemson and went off to corporate, I worked in corporate finance and climbed that ladder and loved it. Actually, never thought about entrepreneurship. No one in my family was an entrepreneur. So I was just trying to get that corner office, with the glass window or the floor to ceiling windows, like that was my goal. Didn't quite get there, but I had friends that were starting businesses and they were wildly successful in their business, but they were hitting these plateaus, right? Where they were like making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in sales, but they were just like stuck in trying to understand how they can actually get more cash. Like I'm making all this money, but I'm not feeling like I'm making all this money. And so I would help them review their financials and have those kinds of discussions. And they were like, Kendra, small businesses need this kind of advice and support. And I was like, oh, it never dawned on me, sitting in corporate and all these boardroom conversations with these CEOs and CFOs and them having these conversations that small businesses don't really have that typically. We go in, we start our business, we grow it on our own. We might bring in a OBM or a VA or something to kind of support us on the administrative side, but we don't have that C-suite, that's there to kind of help us with these big decisions. So fast forward, that's when the Finance Femme was born, and that's kind of how we are now.
Yeah. Before we get to some of the amazing things that I know you have about business finance and how small businesses can manage their cash flow better, make sure things are working for them, I've found that even for people that learn business finance and know how to crunch the numbers, there's a disconnect on the personal side of
Mm,
things.
mhm.
Along that journey, what did you learn about personal finance that, maybe at first it didn't jive with what you're doing on the business side? Or maybe it was like, aha, from a business side that, oh, I could apply this to personal. What was that like for you to connect the two or keep them separate or?
No, that's really good. You're absolutely right. I think on in the business finance side, and what I've even found with like fellow business finance folks is, on business, we can be a little bit more spontaneous and like, oh,
Mhm.
well, let's invest in this because we're investing money into this thing or this service or this whatever, and it's going to bring us back this money. But then on the personal side, we do tend to be very tight with our money. Like we don't think of like um, putting it into certain investments and things like that. We want to kind of hold on to it. So at least for me personally, I know that's one thing, and I'm actually literally working through it now. Like I had to just bring on like a personal finance person to kind of help walk me through
Yeah.
certain things
Yeah.
because they're like, Kendra, you should like invest some of this money. And I'm like,
Mm.
no, I kind of don't want to, I don't trust,
Mhm.
what's going to happen with it. And so yeah, it's getting that same guidance, but from a personal perspective. What type of retirement vehicle should we look into? Should we go into real estate or are these different things? Because it is very different than on the business side where we can think strategy and ROI and all this. It's like a different lane. And so yeah, that's something I absolutely had to get help with myself because I can't turn off the business side of
Mhm.
how I'm thinking about things. So it's a
Yeah.
really good point. I actually never really thought much about it. The
Mm.
differences between the two and how you kind of have to have professional on both sides.
Yeah. I think it's good on you though, because you have taken so much risk in leaving corporate, starting your own business, that you've kept your personal money a little tighter because you might, you're taking a huge risk with the
Yeah,
business. So to keep some more safety net on your personal side makes a lot of sense. So great that you did that. And then now as you're having success in business, you can look toward, well, how do I diversify my investing, because you've invested a lot in your business, even if it was just your
right.
time and energy. Now you can say, okay, if 100% of my investments are in my business, I need some diversification. And what does that
Yeah.
look like? And how do you do that safely? So I love that you're starting down that path. But let's look at this. We're investing 100% in our businesses, right? And we need to make sure we get that return on our investment. We need to
Yeah.
make sure that we're able to keep the business going for a long time. What are some of the most valuable lessons that you'd want folks to hear to make sure they're building businesses that love them back?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I always say the first thing is to just be very intentional, sit down and try to figure out what your end goal is because
Mhm.
everyone's end goal isn't the same, right?
Yeah.
Some folks, they just want something that's just going to pay for their bills and, it's not going to take up too much of their time. And they don't necessarily want a team of 50, right? They just kind of want something that's smooth sailing, easy breezy, and can cover the bills. And that looks very different. And the plan for that looks very different than someone who wants to have something that has 10 different brick and mortar locations and 100 employees and make $16 million a year. Like, so being very clear on what you want your business to look like beyond just money. Be like,
Mhm.
don't set a revenue goal, right? Set like a day in the life goal.
Yeah.
Are you doing 12 hours or are you doing 2 hours? So thinking about it first from that perspective, and then breaking that down. So once you're very clear on what that looks like, then we can start talking about revenue goals and profitability and cash flow. Um, but you first have to understand that, and then once you really understand that, that next step that's going to help us get to the numbers is, well, what are you doing to generate that income? So
Mhm.
even if you're working 2 hours a week and you're maybe subcontracting some things out and you're like a service-based business and you're subcontracting some things out, um, is it 10 projects a month? Is it 2 projects a month? Like, what do those things look like? And from there, you can really start to put in specific details and numbers that can help you understand what and like project out what your business is going to look like. But I always suggest first starting with what you want your day to look like and how you want your business to feel. The numbers follow versus But a lot of folks, what we tend to do sometimes is like pull an arbitrary number. I want to make six figures next year. It's like, do you really though? Like,
Mhm.
why? Like, why?
Right,
What's the
right.
reason why? Does it just feel good to say that? Or
Mhm.
so work that way is my suggestion, my first suggestion.
Okay. Let's take somebody who knows their and I'm just, hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot too much, so feel free to, like, toss this back to me or whatever. Um, let's say we're talking about somebody who's like, "Okay, I've built this business, I'm a couple years in, and I'm ready to start passing off the management of it, make it more of a passive business for me. I can still be the owner, still call the shots, but I'm not doing the day-to-day work of it."
Mhm.
What does that kinda transition look like once you've kinda built something, it's working, but you wanna make sure that it works time-wise for you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question too. I think there's some operational piece to that, right? So it's like operationally, how are you going to pass that off? So if it's a business where you really are behind the scenes for the most part, then a lot of it is just kind of creating those SOPs and processes and training someone, bringing them in, making sure you have enough additional income coming into the business to obviously pay them and still be
Mhm.
able to pay you what you're wanting. So it's some of that. But if you're like the face of your business, right? And if folks are signing up to take your services or to buy your product because they know it's coming from you, well, then there's some other working around
Mhm.
branding and all that has to go on, right? So it's really just about, again, being intentional and figuring out that plan first. And then you can back into, okay, do we have to make additional income for this to cover some of the additional costs? Or do I still have to work and cover 20-30% of the clients or whatnot? But it's really first, it's always going to be about having that plan. Like that's like that, cliche answer, right? But it's like, create your plan. You have to have a
Yeah,
plan. So figuring out what that's going to look like from a timeline perspective. And then once you have that, again, you can start layering in those numbers and figuring out what that needs to look like.
gotcha. And when do you recommend people bring in someone like a CFO, a bookkeeper, an accountant to help them, kind of perform that role in their business?
Yes, I love that question. And I've tried to like perfect it to give specific numbers because I used to always say, well, it depends because it really does depend on your specific business. But I can give you some kind of general guidelines on what I usually suggest. So when you're first starting off your business, like first starting off your business, you're really just trying to make sure you have a sustainable business, right? So if you're generating a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s on a monthly basis, you can maintain your books because at that point your focus is still to actually get consistent income, right? So I
Yeah,
usually say until you hit about 8K a month, which is about 100K a year, until you hit that, then um, then you really want to just kind of focus on maintaining them yourself. It doesn't have to be in a system like QuickBooks or anything like that. It can literally just be making sure that all of your business is transacting under one bank account. So if you have one bank account, only business transactions, no personal movement, money going on in there, then that kind of can like be your QuickBooks, right? Like it houses all of your business transactions. Now, once you go beyond that 100K, then I say you definitely want to bring on at least a bookkeeper. You can get an accountant. There's not a ton of similarities or a ton of differences on the small business scale, but you basically want to have somebody maintaining your day-to-day books and getting you financial reports, essentially. So once you hit six figures, I would do that. Now, once you start to get closer to like 250K a year or more in sales, that's when you probably want to bring in a CFO because at that point, that's usually when we start to hit that messy middle of like, what got you here won't get you there kind of a thing, right? And you start to have to like figure out efficiencies and I need to start hiring people and all of that. That comes with that added layer of some advisory work that you're going to want to have. So I would say around 250 a year is when you want to likely bring in a CFO.
okay. And then how do we go about finding the right person for us? What should we be looking for? Questions we should ask?
You have a lot of great questions. So I'll give you some questions to ask, but I think that the most important thing is in having those conversations and having that initial like consult is seeing how you feel when you're talking to them.
Mm,
Because money is so personal, your business is so personal. So if you don't feel like that relationship can really get built, then it's probably not the person for you, regardless of how technically like aligned they are and knowledgeable they are. So definitely, this is one of those roles where you want to have someone that you feel very comfortable with. So that's the first thing. But a couple of questions to ask is what industries they typically support or that they prefer to support. So if you're a product-based business and you have inventory and all of that, you don't want to work with somebody who's never worked with product-based businesses, because inventory is its own unique skill set of things. If you're a lawyer, there are certain things that happen in your financials that someone has to be very specific and skilled in. So understanding what industries they typically support is definitely one thing that I would ask. Another one that I would actually ask is, what is their typical close cycle, or how quickly can they get the financial reports to you? It's kind of a easier way of asking that, because you don't want to get your financial reports the 3 weeks into the next month, right? Because at that point, you can't. It's hard to really do anything with your numbers, right? So basically, how quickly can you expect to receive information about your financials? Those would be the questions that I would start with. But aside from that, it's really personality, like understanding if it'll feel like a good relationship.
Yeah. I love those things, and I'm gonna pull out something that you said that I wanna kinda underscore. I've talked to too many folks who have a bookkeeper or an accountant who they get quarterly reports and not monthly, and I love that you said monthly and as quickly as possible after the month closes, because that is so important to be looking regularly. And then also so many folks that get those reports, but not the interpretation of it, which I think
Yes.
is the big difference from a bookkeeper and accountant to a CFO and
Yes.
what a CFO would do, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
would if you were to like give a job description or a definition of what is a CFO, what should they be doing, what would that be?
Yeah. And before I do that, to even answer that question that you just had, an accountant would actually also give you monthly, like kind of break down your monthly financials with you if they offer that service, but plenty do, right?
Mhm.
It's typically a bookkeeper who kind of just does the transactions and then sends you the reports. It doesn't do a lot of the interpretation, but accountant definitely should be able to. Now the difference between accounting and like CFO, there's so many differences. Me and my mom, oh my gosh, we just think about things so differently. Her accountant hat and my finance hat.
Mhm.
But the biggest thing that I'll say is accounting is more about like identifying what transactions have occurred. So once you've spent money and it's out of your um,
Okay,
um
let's go back. I heard, the accounting is about looking backward once you've spent money, and then it froze there for a second.
okay, sorry about that. So yes, accounting is more about historical. So it's more about once you spent the money, it's out of your hands. They're really good at classifying, what that should be charged as. So was that legal services or was that contractor's expense? Like they're really good at identifying that. Finance is more future focused. So finance is okay. Well, once you've spent the money, accounting does what they do. They give us the reports to say, here's how Amanda spent her money last month. And then finance comes in and says, okay, great. So you've done this, but you want to get there. So you've done 15K of profit this month, but you want to get to 60K of profit in 6 months. How do we get there? And so figuring out what levers do we need to adjust, what things do we need to move around. That's where finance lives. So a CFO professional, it comes in when you need advice on um, how to get from A to B, basically, how to
Yeah,
get your business from where it is currently to where you're wanting it to go. That's when a CFO can step in and really bring that insight.
yeah. I love that. It's kind of the difference between reactive and proactive.
Yes.
And even before we hire CFOs as the CEOs of small businesses, that are still under that 250, we can perform that role for ourselves, and we probably should, because then we'll also get to know what that feels like, and we'll get a better idea of how to find the right CFO and what kind of things they should be doing, because we've been practicing all along the way from the first dollar we made, hopefully,
Yep.
to when we're bringing that person on. I think so
Yep.
many so many business owners don't spend the time reflecting or being proactive, and
And a
they
lot
go
of
hand
times
in hand.
we're so knee deep in it, you know,
Yeah.
we're so knee deep in the work of today that it's like, sit and think about what I want the business to look like in 5 years or in 3 years or in 6 months, you know, like how can I do that? And but it's necessary, right? Because it kind of goes
Mhm.
back to that concept of plan, having a plan
Mhm.
and planning. So and the goal is never to get 100% onto plan, right? The
Right.
plan is not there for you to always hit the plan. The plan is there to guide you so that you can know when you need to pivot, move, and all of that to give you some kind of overarching vision.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what the CFO will come in and help you flesh out.
Gotcha. Okay. I've got one strange question left, but I want to reflect something about the plan is not there for you to stick to it. It's to give you a vision and a path that you might, meander down. That should be how we treat budgeting too on the personal
Oh,
side. So amen. Okay. Enough said there.
well, and no, on that though, I always say that like a budget, I try to lead with something a little provocative so people will actually listen because we're talking
Mhm.
about money and sometimes folks are just like, I don't want to hear it. But I always lead with budgets don't work. Like
They don't,
budgets don't work, right?
right?
And it's they're there, and if you respect them, and if you know that they're there to really help you, then you do the work so that your budget, will
Yeah.
work. But
Yeah.
you're actually the one doing the work, right? The budget is
Mhm.
just a sheet of paper or a Google sheet with some numbers in it.
Yeah.
You have to actually follow it in order for it to
Yes.
do something,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
a budget doesn't work. So I love that you said that because it's so true on the personal side and on the business side. Like budgets are literally just sheets of paper. We
Mhm.
have to actually still follow it.
Mhm.
And same thing on the plan. It's just a plan. We have to actually follow it. And the world will, things will happen. We can't do 100%, but at least it's there to kind of guide us and to show us where we might have gone a little bit off track.
Cool. I love that. I'm gonna use that. Budgets don't work. We work.
People
I love
listen
it.
when you say that. They're like,
Yeah.
budgets don't work. I knew they don't work. Well, no, not for the reason that you're
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Great. I'll be sure to quote you the first few times who I learned it from. Okay, my last difficult question. How does a CFO interface with a tax professional, a CPA? Do they do that role? Do they need to, do they often clash with each other? What does that look like?
Great question. So they can be one and the same, but I usually suggest that they're not one and the same. And the reason is because your CFO, again, it's more strategy focused. Should not make The CFO should not give you advice solely dependent on tax benefits,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then I'm going to say, don't do this, because I'm only thinking about tax and not the longevity of your business and where you're wanting
Mhm.
it to go. Whereas your tax advisor, or that could be a CPA or not, but your tax advisor is thinking obviously tax strategy, right? So my suggestion is that they're two different people or two different firms, but that they work together.
Mm.
So for our clients, a lot of their CPAs are actually in their client portal, and we're actually they're on meetings, like on our client meetings. And so we give them their financial reports and keep them abreast on what's going on in the business side so that they can layer that into their tax plan. But their tax advice is taken into consideration, but it's not driving the business
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah.
So typically two different people, but they absolutely should work together. They should not clash because the end goal is the same, is the betterment of our joint client.
Mhm.
Um, our strategy sometimes might clash, right? I might say, oh no, they need to do this. And they're going to say, oh no, that's going to hurt them from a tax perspective. And ultimately the client should get all the information they need from both parties to make that ultimate decision. But yeah, we absolutely should work together.
Yeah, I love it. We all need a financial team, not just one person, because that's when we get into a lot of trouble. And I have to say, not my current tax professional, but former ones that I've worked with have always given very bad business strategy advice.
Well,
I love my current guy, but yeah, yeah, long
yeah.
story there. Okay, so I totally think that there's people watching right now that are going to be like, I love Kendra. I would feel comfortable with her. I want to talk to her and see if she's the right CFO for my business. How do people get in touch with you? Where would you want to send them so that they can chat more with you?
Yeah, I would love to. The best place is our website, which is thefinancefemme.com. And femme is FEMME. Otherwise, you can always go on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram at the Finance Femme. And yeah, you can shoot over a DM or anything like that, and we can definitely chat and connect. But usually between the website and Instagram, that's the best place to go.
Okay. And I'm going to let folks know if you've already got a CFO, you've already got, this part of your business handled, there are plenty of women you know. There are definitely women of color that need to know about Kendra and what she's doing. So go follow her on Insta, give her some thumbs up, share her information with others. We need to be promoting each other and having each other's back and getting our voices out there more. So even if you're not going to work with her, go give her a boost that way. I think that would be an amazing thing to boost all of us and spread some love. Well, thank you so much, Kendra, for joining us today. This has been so great. I've been inspired and I'm excited to kind of see what people will share in the comments and what this means to them. So I'll invite everybody. Post in the comments what sparkles to you about the gems that Kendra shared. What sticks out that you want to remember? Even writing in the comments will help others see what they can find if they watch this video, but also help you cement it in your memory as well. Kendra, any parting words of advice? Anything else you want to make sure to share?
The most important thing I'll just share here is, just if you have a business, just pay attention to your financials. I know sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming and sometimes it's not the most interesting and entertaining part of your business, but it definitely provides a lot of insight and it can answer a lot of your questions that you're having that might keep you up at night. The answers lie in your numbers a lot of times. So just take a look at them.
Yeah, love it. And what you shared about putting your goals and like your why and remembering those things first before jumping into the numbers. I always tell folks if you're going to sit down and do a financial review, review your goals, do some dreaming first, because that'll help make the numbers make more sense. But
Yeah,
also, it'll be much more fun to look at the numbers then because you remember what all those numbers are moving you toward. So I
that
love
is
that we're in alignment there.
so good. Yeah,
Cool.
love it.
Okay. Thanks so much, Kendra. We'll have to have you back on in the future. And if folks have questions in the comments, we'll answer them then.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.